School Board, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. We will start with approval of the agenda. I think there are some amendments to the agenda. Ms. Exline, is that right?
That is correct. We do have an addendum to the personnel report, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Scott?
Emma Doherty, second.
Oh, are you off mute? We need to take you off mute. So you moved. Emma seconded. Thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. 6-0. And is Mark on the phone? Oh, okay. Mark Bandre, do you vote yay or nay? Aye. Aye. He votes aye. All right. Motion carried, 7-0. Next on the agenda is the reorganization of the board for the 2020-2021 school year, starting with the election of the board president. Do I hear any nominations?
Madam President, I nominate Gabe Grant for board president.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
Madam President, can you hear me?
Yes.
Madam, I'd like to begin.
Okay. I am willing. Gabe is willing. So we need to take a vote. I guess we need to, can we just vote for who?
Madam President, what you need to do is take a motion at this point. So the nominations are on the table. You need to take a motion for one or the other. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Gabe was, he was nominated first. And so did you have a question there, Jim?
I was just going to make a motion, Madam
yes.
President. I would move that the board elect Gabe Grant to serve as president until the new officer elections are held at the first regular meeting in July of 2021.
Thank you. It's been moved. Can we need a second for that? Yes, can we need a second for that? Emma seconds. Been moved and seconded to elect Gabe Grant as the school board president. All in favor, raise your right hand. And Mark, are you voting for this or against?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear. What do I need to do?
Oh, that was a motion to elect Gabe. And 5 people haven't voted in favor. And so you can vote in favor or not.
I think I will abstain from this.
Okay, I guess an abstention is considered a no vote, yes. So still the motion carries. So Gabe Grant is the new president of the school board. Is that good enough, Deborah? Is that appropriate? Yes. Have we done all the right things? Yes. Yes, because last year we didn't really get it done exactly right. So you want to trade me places, Gabe, or you want to?
Do you want to just keep computers that are contaminated already?
Yes. Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I guess
I will not shake your hand, but
Oh.
on behalf of the rest of the board, thank you for your service over the past year to
Thank
the
you.
students of Salina and to the community.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, continuing on, election of the board vice president, item 4B. I would hold the floor open for nominations.
Almost said Madam President. Mr. President,
Yes.
I nominate Jim Fletcher as the Vice President.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll close nominations and entertain a motion on the matter.
I move that the board elect Jim Fletcher to serve Vice President until new officer elections are held at the first regular meeting in July 2021.
And a second? Emma Doherty, second. You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Mark? Any opposed, same sign? That motion carries 7-0.
Oh, it's contaminated.
Moving on to the consent agenda. Can I steal your
Oh, yeah, yeah.
annotated copy? I'll pass it back.
That's right, I have one.
Okay. The consent agenda for this evening includes the following items: appointment of the Board of Education clerk as Deborah Howard, appointment of the Board of Education deputy clerk as Shanna Rector, appointment of the Board of Education treasurer as Lisa Peters, annual resolutions to establish regular meetings, to waive the annual requirements for generally accepted accounting principles and fixed asset accounting, to rescind policy statements found in minutes, to adopt 1,116 school hours, and to establish home rule, establishing 2020-2021 official depositories as American State Bank and Trust, the Bank of Tesket, Bank 6, the Bennington State Bank, Capital Federal, Central National Bank, Exchange Bank, First Bank Kansas, Solomon State Bank, Sunflower Bank, and UMB Bank, establishing the 2020-2021 official newspaper as Salina Journal, annual appointments, Deputy Superintendent, Shanna Rector, Executive Director of Educational Programs, school attendance officers as the building principals, district coordinator for ADA, bloodborne pathogens, Title VI EEOC, Title VII Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title IX Gender Equity, Aaron Wright, Executive Director of Human Resources and Legal Services, district coordinator for Section 504, Aaron Wright, Executive Director of HR and Legal Services, hearing officer, Robert German, Attorney at Law, custodian of district records, Deborah Howard, Board Clerk, custodian of building records, building principals, custodian of student records, Aaron Wright, Executive Director of HR and Legal Services, food service authorized representative, Lane Norris, Director of Food and Nutrition Services, food service hearing officer, Lisa Peters, Executive Director of Business, food service determining officials, building principals, and Lane Norris, Head Start authorized representative, Lennox Sign, Superintendent of Schools, papers designated agents, Aaron Wright, Executive Director of HR and Legal Services, and Steve Dorsweiler, Manager of HR. Current authorized representative, Lisa Peters, Executive Director of Business, custodian of activity funds and gate receipts, secondary principals. Title I Director, Shanna Rector, Executive Director of Educational Programs. Freedom of Information Officer, Jennifer Heyman, Director of Information. Homeless Coordinator, Tiffany Lowe, Director of Student Support Services. Asbestos Program Manager, Chris Upson, Executive Director of Operations. Transportation Supervisor, Chris Upson, Executive Director of Operations. The minutes of the June 23rd, 2020 regular meeting, minutes of the June 24th, 2020 special meeting, the personnel report and the added amendment this evening, financial reports which include the end of year's bills from June 18th, 2020 to June 30th, 2020, June journal entries, approval of the June 30th, 2020 unencumbered cash balances, approval of the following encumbrance listings to Fisher Tracks, Inc. for the amount of $64,931 for the structural spray and restriping of the South High School track, to Dell for the purchase of laptops for Heartland Central Kansas Co-op in education and stock purposes for the total amount of $68,927.40, to CDWG in the amount of $49,629 for GoGuardian, to Converge One for internet bandwidth in the amount of $136,441.44, to KAGEET Inc. in the amount of $90,136.74 for hotspot services. Approval of a gift from Salina Baseball Enterprises in the amount of $600,000 to assist USD 305 in the renovation of softball fields at Salina High School South. Approval of the 2020-2021 mileage allowance at the federal mileage reimbursement rate currently set at 57.5 cents per mile. Approval of the 2020-2021 petty cash funds for Salina High School Central, Salina High School South, Heartland Early Education, and the district office at $1,500 per fund. Approval of the 2020-2021 copy fees for copy of records at 10 cents per copy. Approval of HVAC repair with Train, an open purchase order in the amount of $30,000 for ongoing fiscal year 21 repair charges. Approval of HVAC technical support with Building Control Services, an open purchase order in the amount of $60,000 for ongoing fiscal year 21 repair charges. approve liquidation of excess school equipment and supplies, and approval of the 2020-2021 facility use fees with no proposed changes. There's no discussion. I would entertain a motion on that. Ian?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda items as read.
And a second?
Emma Doherty, second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mark?
Aye.
That motion carries 7-0.
Yes.
I have a citizen public forum request from Ann Hoekstra. Was there anyone else wishing to speak before the board this evening? Let Ann come forward. I'm just going to read a few reminders for you. Please use this time to discuss items not on the agenda. You may discuss items on the agenda by raising your hand when the president calls for discussion. We ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Please identify yourself and state whether or not you're representing an opinion of a group. The public forum is an opportunity to address the board about policy-related issues. Please do not use the names of specific staff members when making your point. For example, you might say the teacher or the principal. Appropriate language should be used in the public meeting when addressing the board and doing some major remarks. Thanks for being here this evening. Again, just your name and address, and the floor is yours.
I'm Ann Hoekstra. I live at 2062 Raymond, and I do have a question as to whether or not this would be considered on the agenda, because you would like things that are not on the agenda. These are questions that have to do with reopening of schools. I did call the hotline today and could only get 2 answers. Most of the time it was, I don't know. And so I was hoping to be able to ask you guys some questions if I can get those answers. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, and if it is, I'll just go ahead and read them. If not, I want to honor what you guys, what is respected at this time.
It's not meant to be a discussion time, just for you to address the board with any concerns you may have, and then we'll help facilitate after the fact of either getting to the right person or placing a future item on our agenda for discussion.
Would you be so kind as to listen to it, although this might not be the appropriate place or time, if that makes any sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right. I have some questions and concerns about reopening USD 305. Well, not reopening, about how to send my daughter back. I had a lot of questions about the precautions and things, and I was not able to get any answers back. And so I was very concerned that I couldn't make a decision without having all the information. My questions are, and you may not answer this right now, but I guess these are the things that were in my head, what I wanted to hear about. What cautions are being taken in schools to ensure mask compliance? Will students be sent home when not in compliance? Considering buses, this does not apply to my daughter. And by the way, I'm not representing anybody. I forgot to say that. But how will there be monitoring of mask compliance during bus routes? In social distancing, how is it possible to keep 6 feet between the students? My daughter's class is 24. And how is that going to be possible? They have tables, they don't have any desks. How is this going to occur? Also, how are lunches going to happen? Again, not applying to me, but on buses, are you going to double the bus routes because bus capacity will be smaller because you can't get as many students on the buses, 6 feet of distance? How is that going to happen? Again, that doesn't apply to me. How if a child is crying, how is a teacher with 6 feet apart, how we're going to address that and be able to comfort them? Worried about ventilation and air filtration. I'm also worried, are you guys going to be taking the temperature of every student and every teacher each day before they come? There are asymptomatic students. How are you going to be able to address that? Or I know you can't, but that's a concern. If a student gets COVID-19, does that quarantine the entire class? Does that also quarantine the teacher? Does the teacher, whoever teachers that they came in contact with, did they get quarantined? And then if they get sick or, have to quarantine, does that mean they teach from home? Are they able to they're not going to use their sick leave? Are they going to use their sick leave at that time? How is that being covered? And now I'm concerned, also about what if a student dies? How are you going to handle the comforting of the children that go through that? My main thing is we consider in-school education, we now have 3 deaths, 241 cases, 160 actively being monitored, 70, thank God, have been recovered. But in March, we closed down for less. So I'm wondering why we're going back. And how can I expect my daughter to be safe? And I know I have an option, but that's where it is. My husband had a question. This is the last thing. My husband had a question about how you would be able to rate students who are staying at home versus the students that are in class. How are you going to be able to compare them academically so that we know the students who have gone home can be able to compete with the students that have stayed in school? And so that is his question. And about seat equivalent time, will there be a seat equivalent time? These are all my questions, and I know this is not probably the time to answer them, but I'm not the only parent out there wondering about these things. And so, my last one, I'm so sorry. My last one is tomorrow that the governor is going to be having an announcement about schools. If they decide to go to complete online education, will you also follow suit? Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all that you do for our kids. I know you have their well-being firmly in mind, and I appreciate all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming this evening. Appreciate hearing your thoughts. If no one else is here for our public forum, we'll move on to the action agenda. Aaron, right up first with the 2020-2021 salary and work conditions for certified staff.
Good evening. We're here tonight to talk salary and work conditions for all of our staff groups. Tonight, the first one on the agenda is the salary and work conditions for our certified staff. We completed negotiations this year on July 1st. I think one of the earliest completion dates we've had since I've been here. We considered it successful experience. I think the organization and the district worked well together, and we came to a really good place, I think, for the contract for teachers for next year. What I'm going to present to you tonight are what the two teams agreed on through that negotiations process. You will be asked to approve these changes to the contract for next year, but it will be pending ratification by NEA, by the teachers. So you will approve it tonight. However, the association will send these changes out to the teachers for a vote. If they do not meet the benchmark required for ratification, then we will be back to the table for negotiating. And any approval you make tonight will just be considered voided since the teachers hadn't ratified. Okay? So the first one tonight is we're going to talk about is the modification to the salary schedule. This was a large change for all of us. Essentially what was done is we removed, and there is a typo in here, we apologize, in that first bullet that it says under Appendix D. But what it should say is that we removed the 3 existing bachelor's columns. There was a bachelor's column, a bachelor's plus 10, and a bachelor's plus 20 column on the salary schedule. We removed those, and those will now be replaced with a bachelor's column and a bachelor's plus 15 column. Okay, that has the effect of allowing our base salary to come up a bit in a way that isn't extremely expensive to the district. The association has agreed to that modification for the salary schedule for next year. We also allowed for and agreed to move everyone for educational reasons on the salary schedule. So we move people horizontally and place them on the salary schedule based on the number of graduate credit hours they've earned. We've agreed to do that for next year. We've also agreed to single-step movement for longevity purposes on the salary schedule. So the longer you've been here, the additional step that you gain on the salary schedule. And we agreed to add $525 to the base of the modified salary schedule. That will now raise our base salary on our salary schedule from $39,000 this year to $40,385 next year. Any questions about that one? We also have agreed to remove language. We've also agreed to remove language in the negotiated agreement that provided 2 elementary-only staff development days. Those days were included in there from years past when we had different start times for the different levels, and this was required for elementary to be able to meet their staff development needs, despite the fact that they didn't have the same late start that the secondaries had. That's no longer the case. So we'd like to remove those and put those back into student contact days. We also agreed to add 10 minutes to middle school plan time to make that 245 minutes a week to equate with the high school and the elementary levels. We also have agreed to a new provision in the agreement which provides parental leave for our staff, which is 5 days of paid leave for the birth or adoption of a child. We also agreed to modify the illness and disability pool, which is run by the association and its members, to allow them to contribute 325 days, up from 250 when it was established. As the employer, we also agreed to increase our contribution to the health insurance for each individual employee by $5, so that will be up from $515 per person to $520 per employee. We added Kansas Wesleyan to, now we have events scheduled at Kansas Wesleyan instead of just at the Tony's Pizza Event Center. In the negotiated agreement, that when we attend those, their pass, which we all have, which ordinarily would get them in free, costs $2 to attend those events. And then we changed the grievance procedure to reflect Ms. Rector's new position title within the organization, from Executive Director of Administrative Support Services to Executive Director of Educational Programs. A request of the association was to add this new language in the other section of the agreement, which allows teachers to bring an individual representative to any meetings resulting from the teacher's complaint or concern that they make in accordance with board policy. So if they're following a procedure established by the board in our board policies, they will be allowed to have a representative with them during that process. Does anyone have any questions about what we've presented? The actual language changes are in your packet below the summary section.
Any questions?
That's interesting. Okay, if there are no questions, we'd like to recommend that you approve the changes to the 2020-2021 salary and work conditions for the certified staff as presented, pending NEA ratification.
Questions or a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the changes to the 2020-2021 salary and work conditions for certified staff as presented, pending NEA Salina ratification.
Thank you. And a second?
David Doherty, second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mark? Aye. That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you're up again.
Yes, it's sort of the errand show this evening. We're now moving on to the salaries and benefits for classified staff and the professional technical staff. The recommendations being made this year are to comport with the changes and recommendations being made for the certified staff. We do not negotiate for these changes. They're simply our proposal to you based on what we agreed to with the association. We would like to add 1.7% to the base salary on their salary schedules. We would like to request single-step movement for the steps on the salary schedule. We would like to add $5 to the employer contribution for health insurance, increasing that from $515 to $520 per employee. And we'd like to increase the classified sick leave payout, which has been at $25 a day, to $50 a day. You can see the effect of those changes below on the base salaries for the different groups, which includes our classified employees, our professional technical employees, the Head Start teachers. And then the fourth group here are other employees, other positions that are not attached to a specific salary schedule. They reflect a 1.7% increase from the salary from last year. Any questions on that? We're recommending that you approve these wage increases as included here and allow for single-step movement on the salary schedules, the increase to board contributions to health insurance up to $520 per month.
There are no questions. I take a motion. Emma?
It is recommended for the 2021 school year that we approve the wage increases as stated above and allow for a single-step movement on salary schedules and increase board contributions to health insurance to $520.
Thank you. A second? Dana?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'm going to excuse myself this time due to potential conflict of interest.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Mark?
Aye.
That motion carries 6-0. Administrative contracts.
Should I go ahead and wait?
We'll let him take a seat.
Yeah. Go, Jim. Running. Yeah, running.
So the next we have on the agenda is for the salaries and benefits for administrators across the district. Again, this is not tied to any specific negotiation. It's simply a reflection of where we were with the teaching association. So we are recommending that you increase the base pay for each line by 1.7%, allow single-step movement, increase the employer contribution for health insurance by $5 from $515 to $520, replace the current administrative longevity schedule to mirror that of the certified employee longevity schedule, and increase in administrator sick leave payout from $25 a day to $75 a day to mirror the certified sick leave payout. Do you have any questions on those changes? Well, if there are none, then it's recommended that you, for the 2020-2021 school year, that you approve the salary and benefit changes for administrators as included here.
Do I have a motion? Yeah, people, come on.
I'm ready to make a motion. I
Thank
move
you,
that for the 2020-2021 school year, we approve the salary and benefits changes for administrators as stated in the packet.
Emma Doherty, second.
Thank you, Emma. Any discussion? If there's none, all in favor, raise your right hand. Mark?
Aye.
That motion carries 7-0. Last group, retired certified teachers.
Yes,
All right.
this group is a group of people who are working for us regularly as teachers, but who have already retired from Capers or from another district. They also are under contract with us. However, their contract is not the same as the negotiated agreement. I will tell you that the changes presented here are exactly the same changes, are a portion of exactly the same changes that we have made or recommended to the teacher's contract. Simply, not all of the teacher's contract provisions are within the retired educators. So what you see here are exactly the same changes we mentioned before. If they're here, it's exactly what we did to the teacher's contract. This one is just reflected for retired teachers. So unless you want me to go through them again, which I'm happy to do, we just established that we just need to know if you'll apply them to the retired teachers group as well.
If there are no questions, I take a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the 2020-2021 handbook for retired certified teachers, retired educators as presented.
In a second.
Emma Doherty, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Mark? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you. What a great way to wrap up negotiations for a year, huh?
You're welcome. It is.
Thank you
Thank
to
you.
our district leadership team and those board members that sat on that committee, and the NEA group that negotiated on behalf of the teachers. I think our community can be proud of the way we came together quickly and saw some light together. Discussion agenda, back with Aaron on the 2020-2021 support staff handbook changes.
You find this on the discussion agenda because it's an actual handbook, and we usually bring those to you first as a handbook discussion item and then back for a second reading for another meeting. But this reflection, this change here to the support staff handbook simply reflects the recommendation to increase the sick leave payout per employee after they've been here 15 years or more from $25 a day to $50 per remaining day at the time they leave us. And you've already approved the increase. This would be approving the language change in the handbook.
If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to move it to our action agenda.
I so move.
In a second. Dana?
Mr. President, I'll
Yes.
excuse myself again.
Thank you. Do we want to fold motion? Okay. I would take a motion on applying the already approved changes to the handbook.
Okay,
moved.
I will. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Am I supposed to restate it? Is that what you're saying? I move that we. Well, we have to vote on the whether it's going to go to the.
Yes,
discussion
we had to
agenda.
vote on the discussion, the action agenda. Now we're.
We have to vote on the moving it. No. I just moved and we didn't vote. And we did vote. Okay, someone else do the motion.
I lost my computer screen.
The motion would be to approve the changes.
I move we
Do that.
do that.
Thank you.
Emma
I
Doherty,
lost my
second.
screen. I'm sorry, Chris.
And I'll second.
I have a motion from Dana and a second from Emma, and Deborah has fine notes on the situation, I'm
And
sure.
I just want to state that you don't need a motion to move something to action.
Oh.
All of that was not.
So I withdraw my
minutes.
motion.
It's okay,
I see.
but I don't.
We were above and beyond
That's right.
the requirements there.
Thank you, Deborah.
We will send a letter to the Secretary of State on
There we go.
on that topic.
Yeah.
Thank you. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mark? That motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just have a peek on. I think you're too far gone there. There's fine. Moving on with our discussion agenda. We're calling this whole section the reopening of schools, high school schedule, high school eligibility requirements in the 2020-2021 calendar with Shanna Rector.
Good evening. Let me go ahead and pull up my PowerPoint.
She exited out of the Google.
Technical difficulty.
Well, tonight I would like to provide an update on our plans for reopening of the Salina Public Schools in 2021. And so as I go through the PowerPoint, I will go ahead and provide some further information. And as all of us are experiencing right now, things change very rapidly. And so some of the things that we say today may very much be different by the end of the day today, early tomorrow. And so we do have lots of changes ahead of us, but I do know that as we're working as a team, we are getting ourselves prepared and ready for those changes. And so when we think about competing concerns, we have the concern of education, we have the concern of COVID, and we also have the concern of our community. When you think about Salina Public Schools, we impact our community. And so the decisions that we make, we weigh those very heavily, knowing that our community is relying upon us to make the best educational choices that we can for our students. And in the light of COVID, that is a lot of choices and a lot of changes that we may need to make, but we're making those in the sense that we know that schools need to reopen to be able to provide educational services for our students, but we also have to have lots of options for our families and for our students as we move forward. And I'm going to do my very best to talk through this mask. So when we think about the goal, last year we ended our school year, and really when we ended our school year in the continuous learning plan, we were looking at stability. We were wanting to make a stable environment for our students, for our community, and for our staff. When we think about this year, our goal has to be that each student is going to get at least a year's academic and social growth, despite the fact that we know we have a very unpredictable environment. And throughout the year, we are going to be working to make sure that we provide that stability, that we try to give predictability back to our community, and that we're focused on the academic and the social emotional growth of our students. Over the last several months, it has been, to say a whirlwind is probably an understatement. But there are some key actions that have been happening that I think have been vital. And one of those key actions is from the very beginning of the summer, the end of the school year, we talked about, what went well, what were the things that we could grow upon from our continuous learning plan, and how are we needing to prepare for this school year. And so we've had several principal meetings throughout the year. We also had to listen to our teachers and our representative groups. And so from the very beginning, we had some decisions that needed to be made really at the beginning of the summer before we actually ever got any further guidance from the state, and as we were getting changing guidance from the Department of Health and other organizations. But we had to start bringing our teachers together to look at how do we prepare ourselves for the educational environment. And so we worked with a series of small groups in the sense of getting NEA representatives there, and then every time we then expanded those groups across the summer to get more and more input. And at the beginning of the summer, we were focused on competency-based education, and I'll put that into context in just a minute. And then we've also been looking at our reopening plan and development of that, and that development really has been ongoing probably since the day that schools closed back in March. And so we have been working towards those actions, and today we're going to kind of talk through some of the things that we have made some decisions on, and then also all of the things that are ahead of us. I do want to talk about competency-based education, because when we were hearing from the Kansas Department of Education, the thing that they said that we needed to make sure that we planned for was that during the school year, there would probably be interruptions to our school. Where we had ended our school year was interrupted. As we plan for coming into this next school year, we want to plan for as much stability as we can, but if there are going to be interruptions in our ability to be at the buildings, how do we plan for that educational environment to meet those needs? And one of the ways that the state was focused on that is the competency-based education. Where we are very fortunate is that we have had years of work here in this district with the School Improvement Department that have been focused on standards reference grading. And they have been looking at these overarching standards, and those are competencies. And so as we started talking about where did we need to go for education-wise, we found that we already had a strong foundation here in our district with our elementary schools. And they've worked with standards reference grading, and they've been working through a standards-based grade card for many, many years. And so we had that foundation there. So building upon that, we started bringing in secondary groups to work. And so what we did not have in our district is we did not have competencies for our secondary schools. But what we do have is we have standards that have been identified over the years. We've looked at transfer goals. We've looked at all of these things that say, what is it that we teach in Salina Public Schools? What do we need to teach? What's the depth that we need to teach? And what does that teaching mean? What are those learning outcomes? So we had all of those pieces in place. But what we needed to do to prepare for the state was to look at competencies for secondary schools. And so one of the things that's been happening all through the month of June is that our secondary teachers have been working on developing those secondary competencies. And those competencies, when we actually have now 77 competencies in particular in secondary classes, and when we started the summer in the most upside down summer we've ever experienced, we've been able to get over 125 teachers to come together to look at those competencies. And now we know that we now have some standards reference grading aspect to our secondary world. And it's just going to really change the conversations that we get to have with parents. So we're moving education forward, even though we're in this time of turmoil. And so really proud of that. And why is this so important? And it's important because that competency-based education framework, to kind of give you a little bit of definition, and I won't go into a lot of detail here today because that's not really the reason for this particular presentation, but competency-based education is that framework that allows our teachers to think about the knowledge and skills and behaviors that they want from students to master their content and performance area. And as we think about that, and as we think about how do they take this educational knowledge and take it beyond just the school classroom, but beyond into 10 years into the future, the things that we do each and every day is based upon what we learned in school. And that's really what the competencies are about. It's kind of taking us forward there and giving the teachers this ability to measure their learning and measure students' learning no matter what environment they're in. So if they're in our classrooms or if they're at home, we're able to articulate and tell parents, this is what we want our students to learn. Here's how we know they're learning it, and this is what they're going to be able to do with that learning. So talking about competency-based education was important for us, and we had to get that out in front so that way we can continue to plan all summer and into the beginning of the school year. So that was a big action that we were taking. Taking that action allowed us then to kind of now shift into that reopening plan. We have some of the foundational pieces that we needed for looking forward on what are some of the things that we'll need as we plan for open school. And so one of the things that we'll be looking at is the Kansas Department of Education, their guidance. Actually, the guidance was delivered to the superintendents last week, and it is over 1,000 pages, and they were able to work with their district leadership teams with those documents. And so on Thursday, we were handed that document, and on Friday, our district administrative team was going through it and working to start putting that draft and that introductory piece of the reopening plan. And so answering some of those questions and developing talking points and things that we need to consider and things that we need to plan for from that state of the Kansas Department of Education. All along here, too, is that we've had the Department of Health and Environment, we've had the Salina County Health Department talking about the health and safety aspects, how it is ever changing. Continually, Mrs. Exline has been in conversations with both large groups and small groups talking about what does it mean, what does Salina County Health mean, what does the state of health in Kansas mean, what does really the state of health mean across the nation as everyone is preparing for opening schools and thinking about how do we do that in the safest manner possible. And so what we have done is that we have developed a Connect to Learn draft, and that is our reopening plan. And so the executive team worked on that on Friday. We are going to provide that to the Board of Education as we get further into that document. We're also providing our principals to be able to get feedback from individuals so we can make sure that that plan has the kinds of information that we need for all of the stakeholder groups across our community. When we are looking at this plan and kind of going to the fact that I know right now, in our audience up here, across our community, we have individuals that are thinking about health and safety considerations. We know the educational piece. We have that. We have talented teachers that have expertise across this district that can help us get through this educational aspect of reopening our schools. But when we think about this health and safety, we have to rely upon the people, our nurses, the health professions in our community, everyone, and even all of our employees in the sense of how do we look at health and safety considerations across the district. So we were looking at no environment is risk-free, limit risks to increase safety, encourage good hygiene, social distance if possible, require masks, create stable cohorts, insist that ill students and staff stay home, limit large group gatherings. Those are really big, broad statements there, But really, as you're thinking through what is it that we need to plan for, those are kind of those foundational pieces that how does that then translate to the different components of our educational plan and also within our community. So those were some of the bigger health and safety considerations that we had. And so then we think about our reopening plan. And so with that, our Connect to Learn, prepared to educate our students in person, remotely, or in combination. We know that we're going to have multiple ways to meet the needs of students because students have health needs, we have students with their educational needs, we have social emotional needs, we have this vast variety of needs that we have to meet as a school district. And we're looking at those from many different angles. But within that, we have to be able to have safe and healthy environments for them to come into in our schools. And so you're going to see that this reopening plan is broken down into 9 areas. And those 9 areas include health. And so when you think about health, you're thinking about all of the things that relate to, conversations about masks, conversations about illness. What do we do when students are sick, when the adults are sick in our buildings? So thinking through it from that health lens. Classrooms, when we're looking at classrooms, group stability, social distancing, what happens within our classrooms? Common spaces, what are we going to do in lunchrooms? What are we going to do in restrooms? So looking at all the spaces where we have students come in contact with each other. Transitions, what does the hallway look like when we release classes? Arrival, departures, thinking about some of those details and the fact that they do look very different at an elementary school compared to a middle school compared to a high school. Extra and co-curricular activities. We've already provided some guidance to our coaches and everybody when we're talking about athletics and conditioning and things like that this summer. We know that that's going to be a continually evolving situation. And so how do we prepare for concerts? How do we prepare for athletics? How do we prepare for the things that our students that connect them to the school? And what does that look like in today's age? We talk about facilities, signage, cleaning, all of the pieces of coming back into our buildings and living in our buildings again. What does that look like? How do we prepare those? Food service, thinking about meals for students that are there in the classroom, for students that are not there in the classroom, making sure that we have access to our food. How do we serve those meals? Transportation, bus capacity, what happens at the bus stops? Thinking about how do we train our drivers? And then instruction, thinking about what are the best practices when we're in the classroom? What are the best practices to get our students ready to come back to school social emotionally? What are the best practices when we have to work remotely, when the students may have to be off-site on some days and on-site on others? That connection to school learning plan, it is something that is evolving, and it will continue to evolve because we know that we're still in a changing climate. And we also wanted to make sure that we got that document out in the sense of we're going to provide it to, like I said, the Board of Education. We're going to be providing it to principals. We're going to be looking at it, working through those things, and thinking it from that lens of what does it look like at an elementary, what does it look like at middle school, and what does it look like at high school. We recognize we also have other facilities in our district. We have Heartland Education Center, and we also have Salina Adult Ed. Those 2 entities really are working separately in the sense of what are the things that they need to do for those unique circumstances, but they'll be then looking at our document as well to make sure that we are able to share knowledge and to make sure that we're meeting really the needs of all students within our system. Another way that this Connect to Learn plan has been designed is it's looking at kind of the 2 learning models that we are offering to our students. We are going to be offering a learning model that's called on-site learning and a learning model that's called remote learning. The reason for this, when you think about what we want to have for our students, we already said that we want over a year's growth in both academics and social emotional. But we also know that being in our schools with our teachers is very, very important. And our desire would to have our students there each and every day and all students there each and every day. But we know that we also have to have another option, and that is why we have the remote option. I'm going to first talk about the on-site learning, because when we talk about the on-site learning, that's when we're going to have that interaction of our students and our staffs on a more regular basis. And when we designed our document for reopening, we really looked at it from the lens of on-site, hybrid, and off-site. We're utilizing those terms all under the umbrella of on-site learning because there will be times when our students are in the building. There will be times when our students may be in the building but also at home, and there may be times when our students are just at home. And really the thing that's going to be determining how do we move in this on-site world is really going to be kind of on the state of health of our community. And we'll be working very closely with the Saline County Health Department, looking at the guidance from Governor Kelly, making sure that we are looking at the big picture, but also looking at what we know right in our own community, which is that we want our students in schools as much as possible. So when we talk about on-site, this is instruction in our buildings that's face-to-face with the teacher. And this is going to be what we would see happening when we have kind of low risk in our community. When we talk about hybrid, it's a combination of on-site and off-site instruction. And so if we find in our community that we need to increase the amount of social distancing, or we need to reduce the amount of large group sizes, that's when we would look at that hybrid model, having our students in our schools as much as possible, which is very different than what we had at the end of the school year last year. Last year, schools were closed. We weren't having students in our schools. We know this year, no matter what the world throws at us, we want to try to have students in our schools as much as possible, and we're going to do whatever we can to make that happen in a safe way. And then off-site instruction is going to be online instruction that students will have access to. I want to continue to talk about these in a little bit more detail because I think that parents are very interested in knowing, well, what does on-site learning model really mean? When we talk about education, the educational standards and competencies that we have in our district, one of the reasons we had to get out front on the competencies is because we needed that to help us design our models, our learning models that we have here in our district. And so when we talk about district standards and competencies is that bigger picture, and the standards are all the things that fit underneath it to make that well-rounded classroom and to let our teachers know what it is that we want our students to learn. And no matter what model you're in, a student is going to have access and going to be being taught through the lens of our district standards and competencies. If we look at the on-site model, we think about the learning method there as face-to-face. This is the time that students are going to be in our classrooms, that our classrooms will have all the students in our classrooms, and we're being there face-to-face. Anytime we say that we're in face-to-face, in person with a teacher, we're calling that on-site. When we look at our hybrid model, that's going to be face-to-face online. There are going to be times that we may not be able to have all of our students in our buildings. And if that's the case, we want to have this blend of students being at the schools and then not being at the schools, so that way we can have that direct access to students, be able to provide information more directly than what we were last year when we ended in the continuous learning plan, because we know how important it is, those relationships and those connections that they have with the staff members. And then off-site, there may be times in our community that really we need to be off-site, and that a building may not be open, or that schools may not be open. And so we have to have that ability to work off-site or online. And earlier in the summer, you did approve for our students to have Chromebooks. And that is going to help us be able to fill that gap and to be able to serve the needs of our students. So location, on-site, we're at school. Hybrid, we're at school, and we're at home. So we're on-site and off-site. It's that hybrid, it's that mix. And then when we were off-site, we are at home. And so then we think about number of students that are on-site. When we're thinking of the term on-site, that means that our students are going to be all at school as best as possible. And when we think about hybrid, that's when we may be going into smaller numbers. And so if we are asked from the community leaders to be able to say that we need to reduce the number of students in our classrooms, to reduce the amount of contacts that a student may have, that may be when we go into hybrid. And then off-site, we may have very few to no students in our classrooms. We do want to have the ability, even when we're off-site, to be able to bring very, very small groups of students into our classrooms that have special education needs, that might have ESL needs, that are our at-risk students. The students actually that you approved Jumpstart for maybe be some of those students that we really need to have eyes on them almost daily to make sure that they're getting what they need. And that's one of the things that I think was so difficult about how we ended our school year, is not being able to see eyeball to eyeball some of our kids. And then learning time expectations. When we stopped schools last year and when schools were closed, we did our very best, and our parents and our students did their very best to stabilize with us the learning environment and the educational expectations. And so it was very modified in the sense of what is it that students and families can handle during a time of a rapidly changing pandemic. We've gotten ourselves a little bit more stable. We know that we have to focus on that big picture of education, that we have to have that growth. And so the learning expectations that we see during this school year, doesn't matter what kind of learning model that we're going to have, that really it's 385 minutes of daily learning during the school week. So if students should be in school, we need them learning for approximately 385 minutes a day. And we will have mechanisms to be able to work with families to monitor that, to communicate what those expectations are. But learning time is the same no matter on-site, hybrid, or off-site. So let me talk a little bit about the hybrid learning location. And the reason I want to talk about this is because we have over 3,900 families in our community. And so when we think about, we have 7,000 schools, but we have 3,900 families. These families are connected in the sense that some are at elementary, some are at middle school, and they're a family of middle school and elementary. It may be a family that we have elementary and we have middle and we have high school all under the same roof. We have these families that we know as a community, if you go back to our original concerns, we have to think of from that perspective. We can't just think of it from Salina education, we have to think about it from Salina community. And so we have worked very hard to look at our families and to basically put our students into either cohort A or cohort B. And what that means is that a family, all of the students within that family are going to be cohort A. And so that way, if we have to make a hybrid decision, those families get to make that decision in the sense that they know that their students are going to be expected to be in school on the same days or out of schools on the same days, to help support that. Maybe there's an older sibling that has to help watch the elementary student in the household. We want to make sure that we're thinking from the cohort aspect and also thinking from our families aspect to make sure that when we go into a hybrid model, that we're trying to protect and support our families as much as we can. And so our school district is basically being cut into two and half, cohort A and cohort B. And so if we have to go into the hybrid model, and so we're having only about half of our students on site, what we would see is that students in cohort A would go on Monday and Tuesday, and then those students would then not be in school. They would be off-site on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. When we think about cohort B, it's the opposite. So on Monday, Tuesday, our cohort B is off-site. On Wednesday, Thursday, they are on-site. You'll notice that all of our students are off-site on Friday. The decision to have everybody off-site on Friday and why we landed on that day of the week actually was input from parents, from community, thinking about that bigger community picture, knowing that there's a lot of businesses and so forth, that Fridays is a day that in our community may have more availability for families to be able to be home with their children. Also thinking from the perspective of that's our ability to, right before the weekend hits, we know that our teachers can then put their energies and efforts to be able to communicate with all students in their classrooms in an online manner, so that way they kind of have the virtual eyes on kids before they walk into for the weekend. And so we have this method that we really think that will help us if we have to go into a time when we can't have all students in schools. So that's what that hybrid means. That's what that cohort means. And recognizing that, yes, we want them there each and every day, but if we can't, we want to have a plan to get them there as much as we can and to be able to have physical eyes on kids. So when I talked earlier, I said that we had the on-site mechanism, and that's what we're going to see most of our students be part of. They're going to be part of that on-site, being at school with us. But we also know that we have some families, due to health reasons for the student, due to health reasons for the entire family, or just because there's other considerations and concerns that family is dealing with in these times. And so we do have a remote learning model. A remote learning model means that they are not going to be in our buildings. And so again, the standards, the district standards and competencies are going to be monitored by a certified teacher. And so we are connecting them with a certified teacher just like on site, and we're focused on the same learning standards and learning competencies. When we talk about the learning method that we're going to see here, a certified teacher will guide the student learning based on the district expectations for that grade and that subject. And so at elementary, that learning, remote learning, will look a little different than what we see at middle school and then also what we see at high school. Location, home, remote. Learning time expectation, 395 minutes daily, just like what you saw on the on-site, hybrid, and off-site learning models. When we think about materials and courses, students will have access to online materials to meet grade level and graduation requirements. And so they're going to have access to the materials. But the reality is that the students, what we have to do for a remote student may look a little bit different than what is happening for an off-site student at other times of the year. These are students that are not going to be coming in and out of our schools. They're going to be out of our schools, but they're still going to be connected to our schools through a certified teacher and through the curriculum that we are providing to them. When we talk about extracurricular offerings, the students that are in that remote learning environment, the reason that family is choosing that method the most often is going to be because of health concerns and so forth. So the on-site face-to-face extracurriculars, and this includes athletics, it includes performing arts, students that are in that remote are not going to be able to be directly involved in those activities. And so that's something that parents really need to think and consider as they're making these choices. And so extracurricular activities will not be offered to our remote students, but we will have mechanisms to connect them to the schools and find all of those other ways to interact with students in a virtual manner. Our teachers did a brilliant job with this during the continuing learning model. I would say that was some of the things that teachers actually celebrated, is that they had many times when students that had not felt connected during the regular school year just thrived and blossomed in that online learning environment because of the way the teachers could interact with them and the things that they needed in that particular mechanism. And then electives, students will not have access to all the electives offered on site, but we will have actually within some of the offerings that we use right now that are an online offering, like with our diploma completion program, things like that, our performance-based program at the high schools. We have some online electives that are very challenging and very rigorous, and actually the students like those kinds of opportunities. And so we're able to offer that to the students during remote learning. So when you think about and you step back and you look at remote learning, this is our mechanism to be able to say, yes, we want you at school, but we know that for some families this is not possible. And so if you're remote learning, we are going to be providing the standards and the curriculum. We're going to be teaching to those just like we would do with any students. We're going to have the same learning expectations for you. You're going to still have the same kind of expectation to be tuned into your learning each and every day, the students are, and that we will do everything that we can to make sure that we connect them to school and give them a robust education, even though it may not be in our building. So questions about online learning, remote learning, before I kind of shift a little bit into high school? Yes.
As it relates to remote learning, does a student or a family have the opportunity to opt out? So once the school year starts, when is that opportunity to opt out allowed?
And so one of the things that we've provided in online enrollment, so online enrollment actually started today. And so all of our families are able to get on there and to read a little bit more details about the on-site and the remote learning. What we are asking is that parents choose between on-site and remote, and when they make that choice, we do identify in there that choice is for the semester. And so if they choose to be on-site, then they'll be on-site for the semester, and we will work and support that student through that semester. And then if they are doing remote, they stay on remote that entire semester. In December, we'll start communicating with our families, and we may have some families, because health has changed, and students can now come on site. We may have some families that may need to move to remote. And so we will allow there to be a change at semester, but to provide continuity for families, to provide continuity for our staff, and really for our students, we really need that to be a decision that's made at semester. And so that's the decision that we are working under, and that's the information we've provided to parents. Other questions? And so I would invite the high school principals to come up here. And as we talk about hybrid and as we talk about remote and the changing learning environment and looking to our principals for insights and input, one of the things that as we think about high school and we think about the aspect of credits and that, we are talking graduation and earning credits for that diploma. And so as the staffs were talking and going through how did the continuing learning model end at the end of the school year, what were the things that they saw really needed to be looked at in the sense of how do we best fit the needs of the students. And so what we have is that the high school principals working with their staff are making the recommendation that we modify the schedule. And so right now our students are involved in a schedule that has them enrolled in 8 classes. So let me kind of pull up this chart, and this may kind of set the stage, and then I'll let our 2 principals, Dr. Brungart and Dr. Kip, speak to any questions that you might have. And so as we think about our high school schedule, we have 8 blocks and 4 blocks. I'm sorry. We have 8 blocks and 4 blocks. And so we are looking, right now we're in an 8-block schedule. So our students have access to 8 classes each semester. When we look at this opportunity to go to a 4-block schedule, we will also still have 8 classes each semester. So the schedules that our students enrolled in the spring, so when we think about stability and continuity, the schedules that they enrolled into in the spring are the schedules that they will be participating in this school year. So they still have the 8 classes that they chose. And so, but what we're looking at is how we provide access to that curriculum is a little bit different. And so when we think about a high school, we think about each high school you have 2 semesters, and 1 semester is broke up into 2 quarters. So we're just going to go through the scenario here of kind of thinking first semester, quarter 1 and quarter 2. And so right now, our students are enrolled in 8 classes over the semester. That doesn't change no matter which schedule we're working under. When we look at the quarter, in an 8-block schedule, the students actually attend all 8 classes each quarter. And I'm going to go down and look at 8 blocks and kind of go through. So they attend all 8 classes each quarter. So there's an example schedule: math, art, PE, food, science, social studies, English, and welding. So we have a student that has lots of interests. And so this student has this schedule. And so there are 8 classes. So if we were going to operate on where we are now, or where we were, in 1920, then we would be looking at a quarter 1 and quarter 2. And so what happens at the high school, if you don't have a high school student, this may just sound foreign to you, but when we think about a high school, we have what we call a rotating block. And so on a maroon day, we see 4 of our classes, and on a white day, we see 4 classes. And I better say south here. On a green day, we see 4 of our classes, and on a gold day, we see 4 of our classes. And so they rotate, and so Monday, Wednesday, Friday of one week, math, art, PE, foods. Tuesday, Thursday, science, social studies, English, welding. The next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is science, social studies, English, welding, and Tuesday, Thursday is math, art, PE, foods. And so you just see this rotation that happens throughout the semester. By the end of the semester, they have been involved in classes. Every class day was approximately 80 minutes. They've been able to see classes about 45 days each semester, and that the duration of the 8 blocks is a semester, and they also attend ELO daily. So that's kind of that 8 lens. That's what they've been working under. What the high schools are asking for is to work under a 4-block system, to reduce the number of classes that our students are focused on at any one given time, to make sure that they're able to put their energies and efforts in this changing world that we have, to be able to say, here are the 4 classes to keep me connected to school. And so with the 4-block system, we still have 8 classes each semester, but now we're attending 4 classes each quarter. And so we're focused on those 4 classes. And so if we have the same schedule here, quarter 1, Monday through Friday, I go to math, art, PE, foods. So on Monday, I go to those classes. On Tuesday, I go to those classes. On Wednesday, I go to those classes, and I go to the same classes every day, all of that entire quarter. That gets me 80 minutes a day in each of those classes. It gets me approximately 45 times that I get to see that teacher. And so I see and have access to the same amount of curriculum, either in the 4-block or the 8-block for that math class. And then quarter 2, they have their other 4 classes: science, social studies, English, welding. Again, they go daily. They see the class for approximately 80 minutes each day. They have access to 45 days of that class. And so at the end of that quarter, they now have finished all 8 of that semester's courses. So the 4-block allows our students to keep the same number of credits that they would have earned in a school year. And it also allows them to have the same kind of access to the content. Granted, it's a little bit different, and our teachers are going to be thinking a little bit different, but it's getting them access to information and allowing them to focus and concentrate on those 4 courses. And so I'm going to turn it over to these gentlemen to see if there's other things they would like to add or to answer questions.
I think it's kind of important to understand, important to understand the reason why we're going to the 4 blocks is a contingency plan for not being on site the whole semester. If we are forced to be off-site or in a hybrid model, this will be a lot easier to adapt the students' learning to in terms of their amount of work per quarter. So focusing on 4 blocks per quarter when they're either in a hybrid mode or off-site is a lot better for the student. And that's what we were trying to focus on, not just to try to even out times, but to really get a plan so that the students will be more effectively apt to complete the material in the time available in a quarter.
The other advantage is, from a teacher's perspective, instead of having 125 to 150 kids, when they do the 4 block, they'll be dealing with half as many students at any given time. And then they felt like the teachers, when we talked about and reflected on last spring, they felt like 8 classes was a lot for kids to juggle. And so in trying to keep that together, trying to keep up with what you had to do with your assignments, trying to keep the balance of what's going on in the ever-changing world, they felt like just having students juggle 4 classes would help the students and the families out tremendously.
I have a statement, because I think this is going to be a case study to see, what if you love this and you never go back? Because I think it's kind of appealing, actually. Sorry. My question would be the ELO. As I understand it now, the same kids go to every ELO, right?
Correct.
So they would be in that group. They would all stay the same that are within those 4 classes? How do you, I guess you tell me how you're doing ELO.
So we don't see a changed ELO.
You don't? Okay.
If we have on-site learning, the kids would attend their ELO every day, just as they would whether we are on a maroon or a white schedule. We end
Okay.
every day with ELO. The change would become what happens if we have to go to the hybrid model. Well, the kids would attend ELO on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, and they would still have that daily contact with their teacher. They'd still get the support. We'd still do the college and career advising and those types of activities during ELO. We just have to modify it. So we're going to have 2 plans for what happens if the kids can come every day, and then what do we do if we have to go to the hybrid model, and then if we have to do all on-site, we'd have to figure out how we're going to do check-ins and things like that when the kids are in the virtual setting.
One of the things that I'd like to point out on this, that I think when they brought this to us and said we'd like to consider this option, one of the things that has been in the literature that's coming out of the health field is the need to limit the number of contacts. And so by doing this, what you do is you limit, we have had 9 groups of kids that students would have been exposed to. Now we'll be down to 5. And if we're at the hybrid, about 12 kids in each one of those classes. And so it really does shrink down the number of students that would be considered close contacts, and is very positive in that way. So not only is it a strong safety measure that we can take, but it also academically allows students easier balance in a time when they're trying to learn more independence, and also the teachers to connect with fewer students and really keep track more easily of what's happening.
I was just going to say, it's interesting how things continually change and grow, because last year I think we felt like we had finally perfected the high school schedule. So the question I would have is, do we foresee any effect on curriculum or the way things have been outlined in that perfected schedule that we need to use foresight on?
When we were working with the teachers, just because of the flexibility required, they're going to have to be flexible in how they cover the content and standards. And that's why the first part of this presentation went through all the work that the high school teachers did to make sure that they could cover those things. If we were going to be in class for 45 straight days, it probably gives the teacher a little bit more flexibility in how they would instruct, and the fact that they could do it a lot more like they've done the previous year, or the year before that, or the year before that. If we go to the hybrid model, they're probably going to have to modify their instruction somewhat, because they got to tailor instruction for when the kids are on campus, but they have to make sure instruction can use when the kids are off campus. And so we may shift to more, problem-based learning, more projects, more, reading guides being posted on. The teachers, depending on the content, are going to have to approach things a little differently. The other thing that they're going to probably have to do is, there is a chance, if you get the disease, that you could miss school for a window of, probably 10, 14, 15 days, and depending on when that falls. So there's going to have to be some flexibility in there, which is why we really like the Friday build in there, because if you're starting to fall behind because you're sick or you're caring for somebody that's sick, they can use that check-in time to really make sure kids don't get lost, they don't fall behind, they're keeping up and fill in the gaps. So did I answer your question, Jim? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. It does bring up, that's something I guess that's alarming too, is if a student misses a day, they miss a lot now. A lot more maybe than they would have before.
It's the same amount they would have missed if they miss a day. It's just that the difference would be on the 8 block last year. If I miss Monday and I come back to school Tuesday, I don't see my teacher till Wednesday. Under this scenario, if I miss a day, I'll see that teacher the very next day and can get caught up. The other transition we're doing is we're making sure that one of the things we did last year is we put everything was on Google Classroom. The expectation moving forward is that all assignments, all activities we post on Google Classroom. That way parents and teachers can stay engaged if kids are sick. They aren't really missing out on things. And we didn't get in, that's more of a nuts and bolts thing, but that's going to be an expectation that they continue with the Google Classroom this year like they did through the spring last year.
Patron comment or questions? What we would call?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
A question from a patron. Anyone in the audience? Is that all right? Yeah, go. Yes, please. Just again, state your name and address, and similar
Joe
rules
Rubino,
apply that I gave Anna.
Joe Rubino, 1505 East Republic, Salina. Okay, so let's say we chose the remote option. How will the 385 minutes be monitored?
Okay.
Anyone?
Yep, I can step up to that.
I have a couple others.
Okay. And so for all students, if they are in the on-site model or if they're in the remote model, we will actually have a log mechanism to monitor our students. And so parents and students will have direct expectations on what needs to be entered, how that needs to be entered. And actually, that's going to be a state requirement. So across the state, where we have to be able to identify these are the 385 minutes that our students, or the number of minutes that district determines that they have to be able to meet the hours requirements for that school. So all of our students will have logs, and it will be the same for on-site and remote. And so everybody will have that same accountability.
Thank you. First, I also just want to say, thank you, Shannon and Lynn, and the amount of work you've done is absolutely incredible, and it's very much appreciated. I think I speak for the whole community. Other questions, and obviously my daughter's a senior, so we're looking at all our options. And so as a senior, can she just take her core classes to fulfill graduation requirements?
One of the things that, and actually I'll speak to the board, one of the things that we have is the sense that as we look at seniors, we do have a flex schedule second semester that is already part of board policy. And as principals work with families, they'll be looking at schedules, looking at graduation requirements, and making the best choices for students. COVID is not unique in the sense that we do have to look at students each and every year, making sure that we're making the best decisions for students. And there are times when students may have a reduced schedule based upon their needs and the fact of where they're at with graduation requirements. So we will be looking at that, and especially this year, making sure that we have that flexibility. One of the things that I'll kind of jump in the middle of yours right here, but as we think through, we are going to have students that are on 504s, that are on IEPs, that we're going to have to make considerations for and work with the families and look at the bigger picture, what's best for student, and how do we meet those needs. So that's going to be a continually conversation that we'll be having with our building principals who know those families and those students the best.
Okay, I have two more questions. So if there is on-site learning, they will be changing classes, they'll just be changing less amount of classes at the high school level? Okay. And then if the school starts in a hybrid model, will you then stay hybrid for the remainder of that semester?
One of the reasons that we designed the cohort A and B and looking at the schedule that we have now is that if we go to hybrid, we want to be able to transition back to all on-site as we can. And so it really is going to be communication with our Saline County Health Department, making sure that that's the best choice for our school district. And so one of the things that our teachers are doing, actually on Thursday, we were going to have a face-to-face meeting, but because of the numbers, we are moving to an online virtual meeting and talking with our teachers about how does preparing for an on-site, a hybrid, an off-site, what does that look like? And then we'll have other teachers looking at from the lens of remote, what does that look like? And so lots of questions and answers will continue to be happening over the next month as we prepare for that. But it is our plan to transition back to on-site if we have to go to hybrid. It is our plan to transition back to on-site even if we're all off-site at one particular building. We want to make sure that we get students back into school as much as we can.
That brings up one other question then. If you started hybrid and then you transition to on-site, would there then be the option to opt out of on-site and go to remote?
We are going to try to keep families that if we start in, if a family enrolls for on-site, then the mechanism is that they're going to be on-site. Either we're at the school, if it is a hybrid, or if we are off-site. That student would be considered an on-site student. If a student enrolls for remote, that student would be considered a remote student. And so if something happens in the sense that there is now maybe a different health concern for a particular family, maybe there's been an illness, we will work with that family just like we would any other year when students have prolonged illnesses. How do we meet the needs of that student? But they would still be considered an on-site student if they started on-site. They could still be considered a remote student if they started remote.
Just to clarify, if that transition needed to happen, it would happen at semester. So the same, if once you choose to be on-site through the semester, once you choose to be remote through the semester.
All right.
Did that get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I apologize. I didn't.
No, I just want to say thank you.
Any questions? Yeah.
And Hoekstra, 2062 Raymond. And again, thank you guys. I know you guys are working so hard. My question was wanting to know what the health precautions, when will we know what that looks like so I can make my decision by July 30th? because I know I'd like to kind of have some more concrete ideas of what that might look like within my daughter's school at Stewart School, or whichever school, people are going to. And I love the high school schedule, the block 4, but I am concerned about music classes such as band or vocal. These are practice-based media. I'm worried that these areas might suffer by not being able to practice them throughout the entire school year. That's my only concern. Thank you.
That's mine. That's okay.
We've been working with our fine arts teachers. They have done a great job with engaging with what best practices in the national organizations they belong to. We're trying to do that. And we're engaging with them to try and deliver the same high quality arts that have been expected. And they are aware of some of the challenges. I mean, Ryan Holmquist is in today talking with me about the challenges of singing in a classroom, and we're trying to work with them. We're trying to provide a quality space. So we're probably looking at shifting rooms around, like orchestra will probably practice in the auditorium. Ryan's large classes will practice in the band room. So we move the spaces around so that they can still spread out, they can still deliver those things. And we're going to try and deliver concerts just like we hope to deliver activities. So we're going to have to follow CDC and state guidelines. But our intent is, if we're permitted, we will have activities like we've always had activities at the school, and then we'll have to provide more accommodations to ensure everybody's safety. And so that's where we're working, and we're just checking on the research as it comes out.
Yeah, I'll speak to the other question. You asked when we would know about health precautions. We received the guidance from the state on Thursday afternoon. We did our first draft Friday of that 1,000-page document of what's that going to look like in USD 305. Our intention is to work with our building principals on that document this Friday. We did second draft this morning. We will work with principals on Friday, and then our intention is that you will have that as a board at your, is it the meeting on the 28th? At your July 28th meeting for you to consider and accept. And so what we want is we want a high-quality plan. We want to make sure that we've considered what safety precautions should be in place if all the students are in the building, if we're at half of the students in the building, that hybrid, and if we're at remote, and we still have possibly some very small groups of students. And so the state's guidance actually came out, and it really was just kind of overall, here are recommendations to consider. We felt like for Salina, we needed more specificity, and that we wanted more consistency between our buildings. And so that's the plan. Does that help?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I think for us to move forward and allow staff to move forward at this time, I would make a motion that we approve the 4-block plan for the high school schedule for the 2020-2021 school year.
Anyone want a second? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that?
I'll just ask if you think we've heard enough about this to make a decision. Would it be helpful to decide today?
This actually is if you want to go ahead and approve this today, you can. This was not going to be an item that you had to take action on. We were presenting this to you to get your support. And so, but I will probably defer to see if for us, if this would be better for us to go ahead and have a vote.
If you feel comfortable that you have your questions answered and feel like you can move it to the action agenda, yes. Things are happening so rapidly that any decision that we can get made and that staff can begin planning how to mobilize is best. But if you have pause, we understand. We've waited on other guidance. We're used to doing that, and one way or another, we'll be ready for students.
The only other comment I would make is I feel like if we could approve this and give staff authority today, it would give them a little better planning to come back to us on the 28th so that we can move forward for the school year.
And there's nothing to say that this all doesn't change by then. So that's true. That is an option on the 28th as well. Yes, Scott.
When you're looking at the 8 blocks and the 4 blocks, is there one that works better pertains to on-site, off-site, hybrid?
Yes, the 4 block we feel would work best, because if we were tried to run the model with the 8 block, you would, and potentially, if you're trying to juggle those 8 classes and you're only going to be on school 2 days a week, you would see your teacher once a week. That's why we feel that the 4 block is the best way to go, because it provides us with the greatest flexibility. It, as Superintendent Exline pointed out, it's the safest plan because it limits the number of students. It gives us the potential to limit the number of students that would be on campus, that would be in classrooms interacting. And then as we try and condense things, it's fewer classes for the students to manage. So we would recommend the 4 block.
No other comments or concerns. All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Mark? That motion carries 7-0.
Okay, so with the approval of the schedule, I would like to talk about high school eligibility requirements. So going to a 4 block right now, our eligibility policy has that students have to have 5 units of weight to be passing those, and this is our local eligibility, our weekly eligibility requirement, that they have to have 5, be passing 5 to be eligible. We are asking that you move that to 3 for students that are enrolled in USD 305 and college courses. This does not affect the semester eligibility because our students still finish 8 courses and they would still be required to have the 5. I do want to point out that the wording example that was provided to you in the board packet did have middle school listed, and that was really a mistake on my part in the sense that I was focused on the 3 and the 5, and this really is just going for high school. This is a high school recommendation, so we'll modify that language to make sure it just speaks to high school.
Questions on that? Motion.
I would move that we approve the eligibility requirements as suggested. You probably need numbers, don't you, Deborah? Okay. Yeah.
Second? Scott? Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mark? That motion carries 7-0.
So now I will speak to the 2021 calendar. So, one change causes another. And so due to the increased emphasis on the quarter length, it really is important. When we look at the calendar, and every year when we go through the calendar process, we're really focused on the overall semester length. But with this change to the high school plan or schedule, that really puts an increased emphasis on the length of the quarter. And if you looked at our old calendar, what you'd have seen is that there was that the first quarter was quite small compared to the second quarter. And so we looked at that calendar and we really looked to do the best job we could to even out to where each quarter represents the same amount of access to a particular course. And so we are making the recommendations that quarter 1 will end at October 13th, which changes the in-service day to October 14th. We request that quarter 3 be moved to the end of quarter 3 be moved to March 10th, which changes the in-service teacher workday to March 11th. The reason that those teacher workdays have to change is by negotiated agreement, we have to make sure our teachers have the ability to be able to grade and to do the things that they need to do as teachers to get all of that information for parents. And then to also even out third quarter and fourth quarter, we're moving a in-service that was later in April to in March. So let me show you that calendar that you have in your packet. And I just kind of highlighted the section that you see there. So it's really October and March that are impacted. And so you can see where we have moved those days to be able to allow those quarters to be very similar. When you look at the March schedule, you'll see that we've moved that all right in front of spring break. And so that is giving that extended kind of spring break to our students. So, any questions on the calendar?
So, any questions? Entertain a motion.
I recommend that we approve the revisions to the 2021 calendar as presented.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mark? That motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just also want to be able to say that it is the hard work of our principals, our teachers, you know, our custodial staff, our food service staff, everybody that worked so diligently during the continuous learning plan. They have worked this summer. People have come in off contract to be able to provide us support and help us make decisions. You know, to have over 150 teachers sign up to do something on a Thursday during summer to talk about curriculum is pretty exciting and made us go virtual. And so we'll have that on Thursday. Then we have our principals with us again on Friday. And so it is because of the powerful team that we have as USD 305 that all of this is possible. And so I want to thank them for all of the efforts and work that they've done with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you as well for all of your work that you're putting into this. And thank you to the principals for coming tonight to give your explanations and answer questions. It's very helpful. Moving on with our agenda, we're up to school board committee reports and upcoming dates of importance. No dates of importance listed there for us to go over. I would start with Mark on the phone for any board report. Thank you, Emma.
Attended the committee meeting, and then also with Human Resources, USD 305 for the handbook update for the classified staff, and then went to the environmental meeting with the Schilling Air Base thing. And then the Smoke Hill Education Service Center is celebrating its 30 years. However, with the pandemic, so you couldn't gather a celebration, but they did present a new logo for their 30 years of service in Salina and the surrounding area. That's all.
Thank you. No reports. Thank you.
Yes, I want to add there is a date of importance, which is the August 1st walk across the stage graduation event, as long as it is still going to happen when we get there. I hope it does. I went to the chamber board meeting, which Gabriel will now have the pleasure of going there at 7 o'clock in the morning. And they're doing all right. They've adjusted their whole budget, of course, because there's a lot less money coming in from the hotels and the travels and the other ways that they get money. I attended a Zoom National Equity Talk, and that included the Topeka superintendent. So it was interesting to hear her take on equity in the schools. I attended all the negotiation sessions and the environmental meeting about the Schilling water issue. I attended all the Zoom meetings that Ms. Exline was holding with the staff, and I was very impressed that there were several hundred people on those Zoom meetings getting an update on the situation. And I was also impressed with how Ms. Exline answered the questions that they had coming in by the dozens. Let's see. Oh, I want to add that this is something that hasn't happened yet, but I'm with the League of Women Voters. We're having a primary candidate forum tomorrow night from 6 to 9, and it is not in person, although we will be there asking questions and taking questions by email and by text message. It will be broadcast on Smoky Hill Public Television and on Salina Media Connection from 6 to 9 tomorrow, and it will have the cell phone number for texts and the email for emails, and so we hope that a lot of people will listen in. There's 5 different races there, that including some in the Republican Party and some in the Democratic Party, so I hope that people will tune into that and send in their questions so that we can get those candidates knowing what's important to people. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah.
I also attended the Zooms that Mrs. Exline has been doing, and I think one had like 465 people. It was incredible. So we have a very caring staff who want to know what's going on.
Mine may take just a little longer because I think there's some important information that I want to pass on. But I did attend the negotiation sessions, which I felt went very well. The staff, teachers union, they were great to work with through the process, and I really felt like that went well, and we gained a lot through that. The strategic planning meeting and the environmental hearing. Today I attended the Heartland meeting. There was an emergency meeting called by Heartland, and it was done by Zoom, but mainly to address some changes that they need to make in how they function and how they serve students throughout the next year. The biggest thing that's going to be, say, a step back is we had gotten to where we had full-time school day classroom, and that will all be going to part day classroom. There will be 3-hour sessions. There's a couple other things that are changing as far as having siblings in the same rooms. And I'm looking at Shannon to make sure I reflect this correctly. We were both in this meeting. There will be mornings and afternoons. There will be no more than 13 students in a classroom. They'll still serve, the goal is to still serve the 255 students that are required to meet the Heartland program requirement. They are offering some remote classroom opportunities, and they will be engaging packets. So for the preschools and younger, the packets will be delivered to homes, either by teachers or the home-based staff. They are still going to serve meals. That's going to be a change for them. One of the things that Heartland really does, they emphasize the home-style meals, where everybody sits together and they have home-style service. So that's going to be a little bit of a change where the staff will prepare the plates, and just a change up there. They are planning more and longer outdoor activities because that's where they're less confined in the spaces and things like that. And probably the biggest thing that was a separate item there is the way they're going to handle transportation. For this school year, they will only transport special needs students or students. So that's quite a change for that Heartland. So everyone is working hard to try to accommodate the safety and the needs of children as we go through this. And it was interesting, as we were on the Zoom meeting, my email clicked, and it was KSB email for the day with the opening guidelines, if you've seen that yet. And I thought, oh, I'll cruise through this real quick, and I clicked on it, and it's 1,100 pages. So I would just say thank you to the staff and to the administration and everybody who's working so hard, the parents who are trusting the staff and the administration, that everybody's really doing the best they can to keep us moving forward.
Very good. I attended similar events to everyone else, but no official report to give. Superintendent's report, Superintendent.
Thank you. Just a couple updates to make sure that you know what is happening in my world right now. We did have the KSDE budget workshop, and Lisa Peters is hard at work getting the budget prepared to present to you at the July 28th meeting. And so that is a huge undertaking, and I want to thank Lisa and her team for not only balancing closing out the year, but then trying to get ready for the new year amidst the other chaos that's happening. So thank you, Lisa. We also hosted the new superintendent workshop, and so we had 50 new superintendents here getting their first taste of all of the information in a very uncertain time. I wanted you to know that I did meet with a group of parents about COVID to just get some input on some of the decisions that we're making. And I also want you to know that I have a radio interview coming up on Saturday morning at 9:30 on KINA. I suspect that they'll want to talk about the reopening guidance, and so just trying to make sure that we're getting information out in any way we can. And then I also tomorrow have scheduled, Jennifer is going to help, and David Chavaria, with a Facebook Live. We're going to try that for the first time. And so our maiden voyage with Facebook Live will be tomorrow at 12:15. We will make a recording of that, and we will hold that recording for 24 hours, and then we'll delete it. We feel like with as fast as information is changing, we want to give people access to listen to that, but we certainly don't want people accessing old information. And then the last thing that I just want you to update you on is that I do have a group of administrators who are engaged in a book study of the book White Fragility. And we are learning so much from each other and having some really good conversations to try to move our organization forward in just a better understanding of who we are, what we bring to the table, and how that impacts the way we all see the world and what we can do to fight systemic racism. And so that conversation is happening with an administrative team that we have meeting. And then finally, I want to say a special thank you to Ann and to Jim and to Lisa and Aaron for their tireless work on negotiations. We had such a positive experience, and the teams worked well together, and the outcome was just really incredible. And so I feel really good about the relationships and the way that I just want to acknowledge the way you represented the board, and thank you for that, because that is extra time and so appreciated.
Thank you very much. Moving on our agenda, we have an executive session for attorney-client. Take a motion to move into executive session.
Much time we need?
10 minutes, please.
Yes.
I move that the Board of Education go into executive session at 7:20 for 10 minutes for the purpose of consultation with the board legal counsel on matters which are privileged in the attorney-client relationship, which, if discussed in open session, would waive the privilege, and that the Board of Education reconvene into open session at 7:30 in the board conference room.
Is there a second? Jim? Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mark? Aye. That motion passes 7-0. We will move into the board conference room, and if someone could carry Mark.
Don't leave.
as a result of our executive session. We will now move into the work session. Appreciate those who joined us for the live stream. That will be ending. Thank you.